everybody. Welcome to this week's episode, or shall I say, 2 episodes of Catch Up with JP. The guest today is Mr. Bobby Scales. Mr. Scales spent parts of the 2009 and 2010 seasons of the Chicago Cubs. Since then, he's done some really fascinating things inside the game. He was the director of player development for a couple years with the Los Angeles Angels. Then he moved on to being the minor league field coordinator for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Two interesting high baseball intelligence jobs. And since 2023, he's been a radio broadcaster with the Detroit Tigers. I split this into two halves because Bobby's stories were fantastic. To do it justice, I didn't want to make one really long thing. I wanted to split into two digestible parts. So listen to part one that begins right now. Part one's going to be about Bobby's playing days. There's no better person to tell Bobby Scales' story than Bobby Scales. Let's get to it. Mr. Bobby Scales. Mr. Scales spent some time in the big leagues with the Chicago Cubs, and now he's a radio broadcaster with the Detroit Tigers. Mr. Scales, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, bud.
So you were born in Michigan, but grew up in Georgia, correct?
That's right. Yeah,
And then
uh,
you went to college at University of Michigan.
I did. Yeah.
So you walked on to Michigan. Did you have any offers from any smaller schools, and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, no, it was a pretty easy decision for me, honestly. I was born in Detroit, Southfield, Michigan, suburb of Detroit, and then my dad's job took us to New York for a hot second, and then down to Atlanta, where I did the majority of my school from like second or third grade up. So I was a kid when we moved out here, but my mom was born and raised on the west side of Detroit. Her sister was still there at the time, and my uncle's still there to this day, and so a lot of Detroit ties. And then when it came time to go to school, like, really and truly, it was all about school. It was not about baseball. It was all about school. What was the best school for me? You got to remember, so I'm 47. When I was in the eighth grade, the Fab Five was doing their basketball thing. They were freshmen at Michigan. And so,
That sells the school a little bit.
it didn't hurt the cause, right? I mean, and I was a Michigan fan because of my grandfather, really. It felt like I got a T-shirt and a hat in the mail anytime they won anything. And so then the Fab Five burst onto the scene when I'm in the eighth grade and they're freshmen up there in Ann Arbor. And so I was like, I remember my dad took me down to the Omni where they played their very first NCAA tournament game. And we got these seats. You know how it is. You go outside and you scalp tickets or whatever, because we didn't have tickets or anything. We got tickets and the guy's like, yeah, they're great seats. They're like in the fifth row. And they're in the alumni section. You're like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, right. Let's just get in the building and see what happens. Next thing you know, they were in the fifth row and we were in the alumni section. And I remember the first play of the game, Juwan Howard won the tip and threw it to Jalen Rose. He takes two dribbles and throws an alley-oop to Chris Webber and he dunks it on somebody. And I was like, yeah, that's that. That I don't know what it takes to get in, but that's where I'm going. And so, obviously, like I said, academically, it worked out. I was able to get into school, and then I called the coaches up and asked for an opportunity to walk on the team. They gave me that opportunity, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, it really is. Esteemed college career.
Listen, like I said, it was fun. I got a chance. I'd have to tell this story. A guy named Ace Adams. So, I'm already in school academically. I'm going, period, right? And yeah, I had a few not even really offers. There was interest from smaller schools, but nothing really. I didn't have a hard and fast offer. But I'm already in school. It's like December of my senior year. I start calling. I'm like, listen, I want to play baseball. I want to play baseball, whatever. So I call 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, and a couple times, you get the voicemail back then, and then a couple times I got the other assistant recruiting coordinator. And he was basically like, yeah, we're full. We're not taking any more guys. Like, we know what we got. If we don't know you by now, we're not going to know you, whatever. And then finally, this is about the 10th time I called, and I got a guy named Ace Adams, and Ace was the pitching coach, but he was also a recruiting coordinator, and he was also he pitched at Michigan years ago. Really thick Boston accent, heavy accent, whatever. So he says, "Look, kid," he goes, "if you get up here and you get an opportunity, to come by to the baseball office, come down. We love to talk to you, whatever." So, obviously, so I got into school. I didn't do the college tour. Let's go check out where you want to go to school thing. I said I'm going to Michigan. I got into school, and that's where I was going. And I got accepted there, and I decided I wanted to go there sight unseen. I had never been to campus, and so finally we go up there in the spring of my senior year, and my mom and my dad and I, and we ended up making our way down to the baseball office, and I met Coach Adams, and Coach Bill Freehand was the head coach at the time, former catcher in the big leagues with the Tigers, on that 68 World Series
I
team
didn't realize he was
in
the head
Detroit.
coach there.
Yeah, and then he was the head coach at the time, and Ace was his pitching coach and recruiting coordinator. And so we sat in his office, and he basically asked me what I did. And I told him I was a switch hitting middle infielder, and which was a lie because I didn't hit left-handed at the time, I only hit right-handed. So I told him I was a switch hitting middle, and there's no story behind that too. But this I told him I was a switch hitting middle infielder, and only thing I wanted was an opportunity to make the club. If I don't make it, I'm going to walk up the hill. For people who don't know, the South Campus at Michigan is where all the athletic facilities are, and it's the lower part of campus, and you literally have to walk up a hill, walk up State Street, which is a pretty good little hill, and that's the rest of Central Campus and North Campus, which is all the academic units are. So I said, yeah, I said I'm going to walk up the hill, and I'm going to graduate in 4 years. I said either way, I'm going to graduate in 4 years, and I'm going to go do great things. And he goes, damn kid, that's a great answer. So he says, he says,
He already likes you.
he had, I think and these guys, they know, like the network, they get on the horn, they call their friends who are scouts or guys who have seen me play.
But it's still not the same as it is nowadays. So sending emails and sending emails and the
Oh, well,
YouTube videos of your highlights and Instagram. It's a
yeah,
little
and
harder to
I'm
walk on back in those days.
for sure. I mean, for the sake of time, I'm kind of glossing over some things, but you got to remember, this is the winter of 94, early 95, right? So I graduated high school in 95. It's like this is VHS tapes. This is still creating an athletic resume. For your listeners and your watchers of this, like this is the big manila folder where you're stuffing everything in and you're sending it off to the coach in a snail mail. Like that's what this was, right? So long story short, he tells my dad to stand up, and my dad stands up, and he's about 6 foot, 195 pounds at the time. And at the time I'm probably 5'9", 5'10", 160 pounds as a senior in high school. And then he says, stand up. And my dad stands up. I stand up. He looks me up and down, looks him up and down, looks me up and down, and then tells us both to sit down. Then he asked my mom, if I'm a good kid and all the things. And she said, yeah. And he goes, all right, kid, you're going to get a chance to be with us for the entire fall. And so if you do well, you'll stick for the spring. If you don't, you don't. And so I was kind of granted preferred walk-on status at that point, and kind of sight unseen. He had not seen me play, but he gave me an opportunity, and like I said, I came in that fall and I did a nice job, and the rest was history.
Yeah, you did a nice job for 4 years. Very much accomplished.
Yeah, we had some good teams too. Our sophomore year, so in '97, we won the first outright Big Ten that they had won in a number of years. I think it was like 10 years. And then 2 years later, we end up not winning the regular season Big Ten championship, but we qualified for the tournament. So you got to remember, there's a lot of things different than what's going on in the Big Ten baseball conference now. Back when I played, first of all, you played 4 game sets in the Big Ten. You played one Saturday, or one Friday, two Saturday, one Sunday. You had to finish in the top four to make it to the conference tournament. And that's not how it is now, and not how it is in most places. And then also too, if you won the regular season outright, then you hosted the tournament. So my freshman year, we finished like fourth or third, I think it was, and we ended up going to Penn State. They won the Big Ten outright. My sophomore year, we won the Big Ten outright, hosted the tournament, and lost in the championship game to Ohio State. So in my junior year, we didn't even win. We didn't even get to the tournament. We just didn't have a great year. And then senior year, it was interesting. Senior year is my most gratifying one for the simple fact that we finished fourth, and we had to get hot to do it. We had a bunch of guys injured. We did not have a great year collectively. I had my best year as a collegiate player my senior year, but collectively as a unit, we did not have a great year. But we got hot, got some guys back at the right time, and chased it down, and got in the tournament as the 4 seed. And then Ohio State won it outright, so they hosted. And we go down there, we beat them the first night. We end up or beat Minnesota in the championship game to earn a berth in the tournament, and end up going to the Notre Dame regional. And we lost in the regional final. So uh, it was good times, good guys, good. JJ Putz was on those teams. I think 13 or 14 years in the big leagues. Mike Cervenak got a taste in the big leagues. We had a bunch of guys drafted. Bobby Korecki was a freshman when I was a senior. He pitched for 3 or 4 years in the big league. So we had talent. We had good players on those teams, and it was a good time.
And you got drafted in the 14th round in '99 by the Padres. What's the draft experience like? Were you expected for the Padres to take you? Were you expected to go that high?
I didn't know,
Higher?
honestly. I didn't know. I knew very little about the draft. There was some scuttlebutt that I was going to get drafted the year before. I had a really good junior year, but I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't going to be a first rounder. I wasn't going to get life changing money. And in my experience at Michigan and my education, were first and foremost to me. Senior year. By the time senior year came around, especially in the fall, I had done all the question again. See, this is funny, right? See, kids don't know this stuff. Like now, it's apps. Like the scout that likes you will get your phone number, send you a link. You go to the link and you fill out the questionnaire. Back then, it was like guys had to like send you the questionnaire either to the baseball office to your address on campus, right? And so, you would get all the things, and I filled out all the things for pretty much every team. Had some level of interest in me. I really thought the Cincinnati Reds came in. They did the psychological test on me. They did all these other testings on me. The Toronto Blue Jays were extremely interested as well. I really thought it was going to be one of those two clubs. And then I remember my coach, my hitting coach, Chris Harrison. He said, a lot of times it's the team that doesn't really make a lot of fuss or contact you that ends up drafting you. And sure
I've
enough,
heard that
I had
before as
never heard,
well because they don't want everybody
you
to
know,
kind of let their strategy out.
yeah, and the funny part was like, the Yankees, I remember the Yankee scout, I was dating a young lady at the time and she called, she's like, yeah, the Yankee scout called me. I was like, wow, how did he get your number? Whatever, all the things. And then but they do their job, that's what these guys get paid to do. And, I had a guy ask me, hey, I heard you're going to go to medical school. And I was like, I am sports management. I am not a sports medicine pre-med major by any stretch of the imagination. So, there's a lot of stuff that ended up happening. But the day of the draft, and it's sweet and it's bittersweet for me at the same time to tell the story now because I was with a good buddy of mine, Bill LaRosa, who actually is still in the Michigan area, does a lot of work with a lot of hockey players in representation and management. And then another good friend of mine, Brian Bush, and then a dear friend of mine who we lost last summer to a heart attack at 46 years old, Mike Seastead. We were playing golf because we had all decided we're not going to sit around. Billy was a couple years behind us, but we had all decided we're not going to sit around and wait for the phone to ring. That's just not doesn't make any sense. So we ended up going to play golf at Bill's dad's country club, and so at the turn. Brian got a whole bunch of phone calls. He got drafted in the sixth by the Phillies. And then in the 17th fairway, my phone starts blowing up. My dad and my mom are on the phone. They're saying, yeah, they just called the house. The Padres just drafted you in the 14th. And then we finish the round. We go to the clubhouse, and Mike gets drafted. Like they're trying to find him, and end up calling me because the Orioles had drafted him in like I think the 21st or 22nd round. So that was a really cool day. A sad day now a little bit because we lost one of our brothers, but that's kind of my draft story. And then I do remember calling him. So this is you gotta get again. People got to remember this is before everybody had a cell phone. And I used to catch so much flack because I was like one of the first guys on our team to have a
I was
cell
one of the
phone.
last.
Yeah, so this is like so this is 99. I had a cell phone. And I remember Mike Keenan from the San Diego Padres called and he said, hey, you got time to talk, we just drafted you. And I remember telling him like, can I finish my round of golf? Because, I just hit a big drive in the middle of the fairway. And he's like kind of shocked. And I'm thinking to myself, I was like, what are you guys going to undraft me at this point? Like, what's going to happen? So,
Yeah, right.
like, so, so sure enough, no, we drove back to campus and I got back to my apartment and I was rooming. My two roommates are two of my best friends to this day. They're twins. They were track guys and told them and they were happy. And I was like, so I ended up calling them back and obviously the process started. I was a senior. I was going to be a senior sign. It was what it was. So it wasn't a whole bunch of negotiating. So sign or come, sell insurance with my dad at that point. I mean, that decision was pretty easy.
How was your experience with your first taste of professional baseball?
So it was awesome. It was the foundation really of why I wanted to stay in the game when I was done playing. From the very, very beginning, just from, you sign, you get drafted, you fly into, we had draft camp in Arizona, you fly into Arizona, you go out to Peoria and, I remember the first at bat I had, there was some skinny kid, left-handed kid from Mexico on the mound. we're playing an inter squad game against some of the kids that are at the complex. There's this skinny left-handed kid on the mound. He's thick, Coke bottle glasses on, just walking kind of gangly, kind of hadn't even grown into his body yet. Just kind of, then all of a sudden, wham, he throws one about 94 with some arm side run to it. And then he throws me a four-seamer inside, breaks my bat. That was like my first at bat. Now here I am, I'm 21-year-old, college player, done a few things, been pretty good. And this 17-year old kid from Mexico just saws me off. I'm like, what is going on? Well, that kid was Oliver Perez. Well,
Okay,
he turned out to
he's
be
good.
pretty good. About 20 years in the big leagues, with a bunch of teams. But just it's just that was the first experience. It was just awesome. It was great to be with different guys, small parts of the country. My roommate was a guy named Jason Moore, who I still talk to on occasion. He got a bunch of money to sign out of the University of Texas, really good player, switch hitter, and just the collection of guys. That was the cool part. The collection of guys from all over the world, really. But the coaches were fantastic. Doug DeCenzo was our outfield base running coach. Tony Franklin was our infield instructor. He's like an uncle to me. He was one of I still talk to him like quite a bit. All these years later. So Ty Waller was the farm director. A guy named Bill Brick, who's a legendary scout. Bill Brick was a scout. He was our field coordinator at the time. He ended up being a scout for the Diamondbacks and a couple other teams, and we lost him a couple years ago too. But just awesome people and good baseball men. And I don't mean that like in a chauvinistic way, but like when you're that age and you want to understand how to conduct yourself as a professional in this game, and you had those men you're looking up to, it was a tremendous experience.
It seems like the game's changed the last 10, 15, 20 years, where there's less of that veteran players as your coaches and that mentorship of how to handle yourself as a professional. Have
Yeah.
you noticed that?
I know. I think it's real. I think there's just less guys um I don't like the term lifers because it implies that I hear a lifer, it implies that there's nothing else you could be doing like professionally, like in another realm.
It kind of
But
implies stuck.
yeah, it does. And that's not, and for the guys I think that are the best teachers, that's not the case. I mean, I believe in the term caretaker of the game. And what I mean by that is someone who loves the game, someone who understands what the game means to a lot of people, someone who's acquired a boatload of knowledge over a long period of time, and someone who has the capacity and a desire to want to pass that knowledge on. And I think there's less of those guys in the game now than there were when I played. And I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon like back when I played, but like it's different. It's a different tone. It's a different tenor and feel to the game now.
It
I do
doesn't
believe.
necessarily mean wrong. It's just different.
Correct. Right. And I think the one thing I want to make sure that people understand is there are plenty of guys who didn't have extensive playing experience who are good coaches, good teachers. Um, I do think their path is harder, and I think it takes a person who is expert in that area, but also expert at handling people. If you didn't play, to get a real foothold, especially with players. But I think if you did play, I think it helps you because it helps you with credibility, simply for, because you've been through what they've been through on some level, right? But at the same time, you do have to be able to teach. You have to be able to uh, blend what you know and what you see with what's happening with the metrics and what have you. So there's less. It's different. I don't think it's bad. It is definitely different than it was when I came.
It's an interesting perspective how you swung it like that. You have to be an expert at people because you don't have that baseball experience related to other guys. Say if you went to go coach Double A right now, you played Double A one day. You understand how to relate to those players. And if those
Yeah. Now
guys haven't
listen.
played Double A, you have to be an expert at communication.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is that you can't be afraid of the new metrics, the new numbers, and the new language, that surrounds this game either. And I think that's what happens to a lot of coaches that played who find themselves having to do other things now because it's a different language. You better learn it. You better understand it. You better be able to convey it. I don't care how you could have played 20 years in the big leagues, but if you can't speak the same language as these kids now, then you can't help them. And at the end of the day, if you are coaching or if you're in a management space in professional baseball, your job is to figure out a way to get this player to the next dot in their development, whether they're in A ball or whether they're 5, 6, 7 years into their major league career. So, using the technology and the tools at your disposal, plus the experience that you have as a professional, both playing and then coaching. You have to blend all those things. It's a blend of everything.
And that's not just a baseball thing. That's a life thing. If you're managing
It's
a bank or a restaurant, if you're an engineer, you have to get that technology.
the Orioles thing is funny because I always forget about that because I was only there for like I don't know, like 2 weeks or something like that.
So it's like 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually a player to be named later. So this is how that went. Um, it was 2006. I had signed. So 2005 was my last year with San Diego. I was a 6-year free agent. Pretty much knew I wasn't going to go back there. Even if they wanted me back, I wasn't going to go back. Like I was there for 5 years, guys. Like if you didn't want me to get to the big leagues with you guys, I better go try somewhere else, right? So signed with the
Which is the
Phillies,
reason for that 6-year contract. That's why it exists. And the Rule
and
5
it's a good
draft.
thing. Yeah, yeah, it's great. Because I played with I played under some coaches that got stuck in organizations behind really good players, and they never got to the big leagues. And you look up their numbers, like, dang man, what happened over there? Man, just got stuck. It was what it was. End up with the Phillies in '06. Had a great year in Scranton on one of my favorite teams I ever played on. John Russell was the manager. We had some good dudes and some funny cats on that team, man. It was a blast. We end up not winning the international league, but it was it was a good time. So at the end of the season, I got a call from the Steve Novarita, who was the farm director in Philadelphia at the time. He said, "Look," he goes, well, you were a player to be named later in the Jeff Conine deal to bring Conine over here, so we're going to send you that way. You'll hear from the Orioles, some later today or whatever. Sure enough, and then he goes, "Hey, we really want you back, so just don't sign with them." So I was like, all
Might
right.
be tampering. I don't know.
At the end of the day, like I don't know, like it was weird because like it was literally like I don't know the date of the transaction, but it was like 2 weeks in the end of, it was going to be 2 weeks in the end of the World Series, and 5 days after the World Series, free agency starts in the entire industry. So it was like it was no more than like I don't know, it was 3 weeks
I like
total.
that. It was like 2 weeks. Like you were traded on the October 1st and granted free agency on the 12th or 14th or something.
So
Like two
I
weeks.
don't remember the dates, but it was weird because so then um Steve calls me, and then I don't even remember who I talked to with the Orioles, but they called me and they said, "Hey, welcome. We'll get some information out to you, this, that, and the other." I'm like, "Okay." And so then uh the date comes up where I'm a free agent, and I never heard from the Orioles again. And I was like, "All right." And so then, interestingly enough, the first day of minor league free agency, the Boston Red Sox called my agent Barry Meister, and Barry called me and he said, "Hey, Boston's interested. You want to go over there?" I was like, I'm a big believer in going where you're wanted, and they called first, so let's make it happen. And that was it. And it was really easy. I signed over there, got an invite to camp, and that's how that went.
So you got to camp and you were wanted.
Yeah. So the funny part, so that was 2007. Obviously, they go on to win the World Series, right? So that camp was great, and the reason that camp was great because I had a horrible big league spring training in 2006, and they wanted me to do well. They gave me some rope to do well, but boy, I put so much pressure on myself in my very first major league spring training. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna make this team, and they're gonna know who I am, and this, that, and the other. But I played awful. I was the worst player there. Uh, and so the only thing I wanted to do, I remember this is the first time this happened to me too, and I took this with me the rest of my time. I went to spring training, get down there. Eric Francona's walking through the clubhouse in Boston. And the thing that I thought was really cool is I'll never forget this. He came up to me, and it's one of those things where sometimes if you go up to people and they're in their locker, you can kind of look over their shoulder if you don't know who they are, or if you hadn't met them before, you can read the name. And I was not standing at my locker. I was in all these clubhouses that are the same as spring training. You got the big dogs where they want to be, and then you got kind of like like non-roster invite row.
Yeah.
Right. You got non-roster invite row. Right. I was standing over there, but I was not in front of my locker. And he looked up. You could see I could follow his eyes. He looked up. That wasn't me. And then he said, "Hey, Bobby, nice to meet you." So he had done a ton of homework on assuming everybody in there and realized who I was and didn't have to ask me and whatever, talk to him. And then I think 2 days later we had our individual meetings with Theo and Tito and every player from David Ortiz to me, had individual meetings with him prior to spring training. And at that point, I got drafted as second baseman, but I was a utility player. I played everywhere at that point, just put me out there. And so Tito asked me, "Hey, what's your best position?" I said, "Playing, just put me out there." He laughed. I thought it was funny. And then he goes, "No, seriously." He goes, "What do you want to get out of this camp?" And so I told him, I said, "Listen," I said, "Skip, I was terrible last year in Major League Camp with Philadelphia. Absolutely awful. I put too much pressure on myself." I said, "My only goal is that I want to go out there. I want to have some fun. I'm going to play this game hard. But also, too, I want to show you that if you need a guy from Pawtucket this year," and you go around the room, right? So that clubhouse was Veritek, Poppy, Manny, Mike Lowell, Euclid, Pedroia. I mean, there's no spots on this team. Pedroia's a rookie. He came up the year before. He was their big prospect. He's going to start the year at second base. Everybody knows that, right? And I said, "Look, I'm not going to make this team. I know that." I said, "But you're not going to get through this year with just the guys you leave Fort Myers with." I said, "I want to be the guy that if you need a guy, I can show you that I'm playing good enough and you can trust me in any position." He goes, "That's a great answer. You will get an opportunity to do that this spring." And he ran me out there the whole time, and I played well, and I end up getting about probably 50 or 60 at bats in a major league spring training, not being a
Wow.
guy. Yeah, and it kept getting more and more interesting because you go through the cuts, like Kevin Cash was on that team, Joe McEwing was on that team, and we get to the end of major league camp, and like everybody's gone except me, Cashy, Joe Mack, and some pitchers that got held over just to soak up some of the volume. So I remember about 8 days left in spring training, he brought me in. He said, "Listen," he goes, "you did a great job. You're not going to make the team. Do you want to go down the street to minor league camp and play every day and get ready to play every day in Pawtucket? Or do you want to go stay here? Now, if you stay here, I can't guarantee how many at bats I'm going to give you because I got to let the dogs run at this point." And I was like, "If it's all the same to you, I'd rather stay here. I haven't played every day. I will be ready to play in Pawtucket when that time comes." And sure enough, he goes, "Okay, just remember, I can't guarantee you how many at bats I'm going to give you." Now we had 8 days left to camp in 7 games. I ended up starting 6 of those 7 games. So things change in a hurry, and he kept running me out there. And Tito's fantastic, and I see why his teams always perform because he has a special way about people. He can drag the best out of every single person that crosses his path, and that was probably. I mean, of course, right? Like I had spring trainings where I was more a factor and more had a real opportunity to make the team, but that was probably my favorite spring training because it really freed me up to show me that I could play in the big leagues if I got that opportunity. And it was just a treat having 30 days in that camp.
That's so fun. I love hearing those tough decisions where somebody says, "Hey, you can choose A or B. What are you gonna do?" And I love hearing the response to those. That's people put themselves in the shoes of big leaguers hitting a grand slam in the World Series Game 7. But to put yourself in the shoes of that decision of, do I go down the street to minor league camp or do I stay stick around here? That's so
It
insightful.
uh, it wasn't hard.
I get you. I
It
get
wasn't
you.
hard.
But
You want
if
to
you're
stay?
sitting on the bench in the 40 heat for
Yeah,
those last 7 games, that would suck. But at
yeah.
least
It
you're out there
wasn't.
playing in minor league camp. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, look, and the thing, I got so many. It was interesting. Like you look back, it's one of those things in life where you look back and you don't realize how much you learned from certain experiences until years later, until you can kind of reflect and go back on certain things. And I just remember there was about a 2 week span. So when you're a non-roster invite, and again, you got to remember it's different now. Now all these teams they have apps, and you get the app on your phone when you sign, and it sends you all the information or whatever, right? It wasn't that way back then. Like you walk in the clubhouse and you look at the bulletin board, and then on the way out of the clubhouse, you walk out of the clubhouse and you look at the bulletin board and you look at it 3 or 4 times and you go find the other bulletin board to make sure that all the information is there because that was your opportunity to figure out what you need to do. So one of the things I used to do, and again, baseball culture's changed in this too. Like these guys don't, they get to the stadium for like spring training at like 7:38 now. Whereas I used to walk in that building as a player. I used to walk in that building like 5 o'clock. And the reason I did was like, okay, I'd get there early. If something went up on the board or something changed from the night before, if I'm there, you can't be wrong, right? You get there, You get your lift in, you towel off, whatever, put your practice uniform on, whatever, and then you sit around. And the reason you sit around is because if the plans change, or if a guy turns up hurt, you want, hey, you Scalesy, you're gonna go on a trip instead of so and so. Okay, awesome. Like you're there and you're top of mind. And that so I always did that. And I share
I
this
have a
story
feeling you
because
still do that in the other careers you've had since
I do. It's just
as
my
well.
nature. I don't sleep a
Same.
ton anyway, so it's that's just how I'm wired. But I remember one day I get there, it's like 5:30, and I put my stuff down and I see Poppy's walking out of the weight room. Like he's walking out and he's got a
Yeah,
full
just done.
lather. He's done with his lift. And he says, "Hey man, what are you doing here?" All the things, So I said, "Hey man, like I said, if I'm here early," I said, "I'm non-roster guy. If I'm here early, something happens, I can't be wrong." You're like, he goes, "That's smart." He goes, "You want to hit?" Yeah, I want to hit. So end up for like the next 2 weeks, it's me, David Ortiz, Manny Ramirez, and you remember a big prospect, Willie Mopena.
Yeah, that guy got
Like,
mashed.
hell, he hit balls as far as anybody, right? Like that's the hitting group. And I'm like, I have no business being in this hitting group right now. But I was there early and I got my opportunity to hang out with him and we would go hit early. And then, and the part that I always love is like, now if you asked him, he probably wouldn't even remember this because he probably did this to a lot of guys. But like he would, here I am, I got no big league experience. And I'm in there, I'm switch hitting, I'm going back and forth, right and left handed. And he's asking me questions like, how do you go about this? How do you go about that? What do you think about this? And what do you think about in this situation here? Like it wasn't just in there. It wasn't mindless hitting. These are,
It was
he's
classroom.
stimu it's the classroom, man. It's the classroom. Like I am deep in school. And then he's asking me questions and he likes my answers or whatever. Or he'll say, hey, I know you haven't been here yet, but think about this. And I said, so I asked him one day, I said, Poppy, like, he goes, hey man, listen, here's the deal. He goes, if you're in this clubhouse, that means our team thinks you have a chance to impact our roster. If you come up for one day and you do something positive to help our team win one game and we win the division by a game and we go on to win the World Series, you helped us win. So I want you to be comfortable here and I want you to know that have the confidence that if you get called up that you everything's going to be cool.
He's right. He's absolutely right.
I never I was just so taken aback at that. And he's absolutely right. But it's just like, wow. It's something that I will never forget. It's a lesson in leadership. It's a lesson in when you're the clubhouse leader, you can decide to make young guys' lives miserable, or you can decide to make them comfortable because at the end of the day, the ultimate thing is winning. And he chose that one. And it didn't matter who it was or how old you were. And at that point, even then, I was older than most guys who hadn't been to the big leagues, right? So um it was awesome. That experience, that 2007 spring training was just is something I'll never forget.
Good. I'm glad I asked you about that. 2008, you end up over the Cubs. Make your big league debut at 31 years old.
Yeah, that was eight. So I went the next year. I went to the Cubs. Had another subpar spring training, but I had a great year. 320. I think I was like four 415, something like on base percentage. I think I OPS near 900 or whatever. 15 homers was a career high for me. I had a great year. It didn't get called up. That one hurt. But then I was like, I didn't want to bounce around organizations. I was a 6-year minor league free agent again. I didn't want to bounce around. They expressed interest very early. And I said, you know what? I want to sign right back here. And so I did. And then nine, I went to spring training, had a good camp. And I remember at the end of camp when I got sent out, Jim Hendry was like, listen, he goes, you played great. You played great. You did everything we asked you to do. He's like, if you go down there and you do your job and the need arises, you may be the first guy up. And so I was like, okay. So I got sent out, went down and did well. And then uh May 1st, I got called up, sort of. I didn't get activated. I was in Wrigley and then went back down. And then May 4th, got called up, got activated, was on deck when Coy Hill bounced into a double play to end the game. And then I got to start the next day against the Giants.
Well, what a week.
Yeah, we were in Memphis playing against the Cardinals AAA and Memphis Redbirds. And this is on the 30th of April. We had an off day in Memphis. And so we had a really, really young AAA team. It was like very young. And I was like clearly the oldest guy, the veteran. Bobby Dickerson was my manager, now the infield coach with the Phillies. He called me into his hotel room. I was at the Flying Fish getting something to eat. It was like midday or whatever. So I get the food, take it back to the hotel, go up to his room. Um, and Bobby was there, Mike Mason, the pitching coach, and Von Joshua, my hitting coach, was all there. And I was like,
Yes.
what's going on here? He's like, all right. So Bobby gets down to it. He's a no nonsense guy too. And he's like, look, here's the deal. Aramis Ramirez is he kind of tweaked his calf yesterday in Arizona. They got an off day today. He says they don't know how he's going to turn up tomorrow when he gets to, when he gets to Wrigley. And so you got to remember back then that the injured list, the DL as it were, the injured list was 15 days. So it's 2 weeks. If you put a player on there, you're going to lose for 2 weeks, right? So long story short, he says, look, they're going to fly you to Chicago, and once you get to Chicago, call the trainer and say, hey, listen, I'm here. What do you want me to do? And just make sure they know you're in town. So I was like, cool. So he's like, listen, you can't go telling your buddies. You can tell your wife, tell your parents, so they're not wondering where in the world you are or whatever. So I remember calling my then wife, and I said, look, you can't tell anybody I'm going to the big leagues tomorrow, but I may not get activated. And so then there's questions. All right, so to answer all the questions, I call my parents. They're like, well, like I was like, you can't tell anybody. So I fly into Chicago, and one of my really good friends, Peter Marte, he was on our team in college. He's working or whatever. As soon as I hit the ground, right, he starts calling. People start calling, and he calls me. He says, "Hey, buddy, you here?" I'm like I didn't tell anybody, right? So, but as the reporters know, they know so it's all over the papers. It's in all the papers, whatever. He goes, "Are you here?" I was like, yeah, like, why do you know? He goes, it's all over the place. I said, okay. And then he says something to me that's hilarious. He goes, hey, listen, I got to go to my boss's office. I got to quit my job, and then let's go get lunch. So I was like, okay. He goes, no, it's fine. I got
Did
something
you
else
fake
lined
a
up.
tummy ache maybe and just
Right.
call
I was
in for
like,
the day?
I was like, he goes, no, it's fine. I got something else lined up. Don't worry about it. I just got to quit my job real quick. So sure enough, he quit his job. We go to lunch, and then I go to Wrigley. And I walk in, and the first person that greets me is Aramis Ramirez. I walk in the clubhouse, and he says, "Hey, man, are you here for me?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I'm just here." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I got no chance." He goes, "This doesn't feel good. I got no chance." I was like, okay." So then the thing was like, what I didn't want to do because I had seen this happen to a teammate of mine. You get the call up, just in case call up or whatever, and you don't get activated, and then you get back down, and then you never get activated, you never go to the big league. So what I just mentally didn't want to take myself to that place. Like, I am not going to, this is not going to enter my mind. I'm here, I'm going back. I remember kept telling myself that, right? So sure enough, right, I go up, Lou Pinella's the manager. I knock on the door. Hey, Skip, I'm here. I know the deal. Everything's cool. I get it. If he can go, then he's going to go. If he can't go and you got to put him on, then I'll be here. And whatever you need from me is great. So I do all that. And so it's like we have a night game that day against the Marlins. And so it's like 4:15, stretches at 4:20. I still don't know, should I get dressed and go out to stretch? What should I do? So I don't get dressed and I just hang out. I'm sitting there. Everybody's stirring about. And sure enough, about 4:30, Jim Hendry walks in, comes and grabs me, goes into Mark O'Neill, the head trainer's office, and says, hey, listen, we're going to send you back. I think Aramis is going to be good in a few days, but I can't lose him for 2 weeks. And we think he's going to be good in 2 or 3 days. I was like, that makes sense. He goes, I feel bad for you. I'm going to make it up to you. I was like, listen, this is the game, man. Like, we signed up for this. I'm good. He's like, listen, stay tonight here, get a good steak, hang out, whatever. And we'll get you back to AAA tomorrow. I was like, if it's all the same, like by now it's like 5 o'clock. I was like, can you get me on the last flight back to Memphis? And he's like, you want to go back tonight? I go, yeah. I said, if I'm going to be in AAA, I want to play tomorrow. So gets me on the last flight back to Memphis. I end up getting back there about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I see the boys walking in from the game. And, was what it was. And so a few days later, Carlos Zambrano, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had already hit a homer in that game. He was a really good hitting pitcher, right? So
Absolutely.
he had hit a homer in that game. And then he tried to bunt one time and ran down the line and pulled his hamstring. So um I end up going up for him. It was supposed to be a short stint. Some other stuff happened. I ended up staying for another 6 weeks. Yeah, it was an interesting week. My first call up in a week in the big leagues.
That's awesome, man. I love hearing those stories. After your time with the Cubs, how did you end up in Japan?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Another funny story. So up and down in nine, and then in 10, up and down a little bit. And so then went to spring training in 11, signed back. They took me off the roster, DFA'd me, clear waivers. I elected to go back. And, Jim Hendry calls me that day and says, look, he says, we want you back. He goes, you come to camp with us in 11, you got a realistic chance of making this club. Because you did a good job for us the last couple of years. Appreciate your work. And so the thing I appreciate, I see Jim from time to time, whether it be winter meetings or whatever. I say, listen, man, like I appreciate what you did for me. You could have gone a different bunch of different directions and you didn't. And the one thing I appreciate more than anything else is everything he ever told me that was going to happen was true. Like he said, look, he shot me straight. He never BS me. And I appreciated that. And so he called me and said, hey, you got a chance to make this team in 11. I said, okay. So I go to, show up in 11 spring training and I played great. And, it was really, it came down. I don't know who it came down to. I don't know what the decision tree was, but at the end of the day, I was the last guy that got notified that he wasn't making the club. So I was a 26 man back then. Now it's 27, but I was a 26 man then. And I go to AAA and he's like, the deal. Like if you're playing good enough, we're going to come get you. So I trusted that and I believed that. And I did. And I went down there and I was playing well in 11 and thought I was going to get a chance to go up. And there was a couple games where I'm completely healthy. A couple, like 2 or 3 days in a row where I was completely healthy and I ended up not playing. And usually that's a sign of something's going on upstairs. They're holding you out because they don't want you to get hurt if they want to choose you. So I remember one day I still wasn't in the lineup and we come in, we have a night game in Iowa. They have a day game in Chicago and I see some skinny, lanky kid playing second base for the Cubs. That skinny, lanky kid was DJ LeMahieu. So he turned out he probably made the right choice then too. So, but we were going to we had a 4 game set in Omaha, which is the Royals AAA, and they had a bunch of good pitching and a bunch of hard throwers coming out of that bullpen. This is the Jeremy Jeffries. I think Hoshaver was still up and down at that point. I could be wrong on that, but they had some dudes and they were bringing it. And I had a great series in Omaha. I was like 5 or 6 for 17. I had a couple homers. I remember I hit a grand slam. I stole a couple bases in that series. I had a boatload of RBIs, and we had a kid named Brian Lahira on our team. And Clint Robinson was on the other team. And usually Japan, um, they're looking for corner power guys or
Right.
power pitchers, right? And that's usually what ends up over there. So I had a great series, and I thought they were looking at those two guys, which they were. But what I didn't realize is there was a team over there, Nippon-Ham, that had their second baseman, Kensuke Tanaka, broke his leg sliding into second, probably like a week, 10 days before that. And so they needed a second baseman to fill the gap. And I was playing primarily second base on that Iowa club that year. And so we're driving back from Omaha to Iowa, 2 hour drive, door to door. And my agent calls and says, "Hey, if do you have any interest in playing in Japan?" I'm like, yeah, of course. And so sure enough, man, it went quick. The whirlwind was quick. Like, from that first conversation to the time I touched down in Tokyo and joined the team, it was 9 days.
How was that first experience in Japan for you?
Um,
The
awesome.
culture, the game.
It's funny. Nippon Ham is in Hokkaido. It's in the northernmost island of Japan. And the city's it's Sapporo. So, but they were on the road, and they were on the road on a 10 game road trip in Tokyo. So I met the team in Tokyo on the road, and then I played there. I worked out with the team for 3 or 4 days. Then my translator and myself end up going to Korea to get my visa, and that's what sped the process up. Normally, you find a city that's close to you. You go to the Japanese embassy there, or you go to a Japanese embassy somewhere, and you get the visa, and then you travel over. What they did is just kind of circumvented the process by getting me over there, and then I had to go to another country. I had to go to Korea to get my visa. So that's why it was so quick. We end up going there, and then I came back. But when I got back, like I said, I met the team in Cebu, which is a suburban Tokyo club, and they had a guy named Mayo Fernandez. Now, Mayo Fernandez got a cup of coffee in, like, I want to say 2003 or four with the Montreal Expos. And then after that, he found his way over to Asia, and he was like a 9 year veteran at that point in Asian baseball. And I said, "Hey, man." gave me a big welcome. How you doing? Nice to see you there and everything. And he said, "Hey, you think you know baseball?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm no expert, but I'm one of the,
I've done
I've done it. I'm pretty good. I know what I'm doing. I know how to play. I'm a professional." He goes, "Okay, here's the deal." And I'm 33. Am I 33? Yeah, I'm 33 years old at this point. He says, "Okay, here's the deal. Listen, everything you know about the game, there's a trash can in that dugout. Put it in the trash can and open your mind because they don't do it the same here." And those are no truer words have ever been spoken in any context ever because there's uniforms, there's bats and gloves. The positions are the same, but the game strategy, the way they go about it, the way they train the game is a completely different animal. And it is fascinating. And so
I
I
know there's
love
guys
this.
that go over there and struggle and hate it and have a terrible experience. Maybe they needed a Mario Fernandez to go up to him and tell them to throw their baseball knowledge in the trash, and they could have
You have
helped
to
to
you
improve it.
have to open your mind and let go because if you don't, you will not make it. You're going to be exposed to different things, different ways of thinking about things, different ways I mean, different ways of taking batting practice. Like the entire experience is something like you've never seen. And the guys who are open-minded, who have a growth mindset, they survive. The guys who don't, they don't. Those are the ones you hear about. They're on the big league team for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then they're in the Japanese minor leagues for the rest of the time they're there. I think part of it is like, oh, I want to go over here, I want to experience it. This is not a tourist experience. You're there to ball. You're there to play well. And like that's the first thing. But the second thing is you have to be there to play well with the intention, with the understanding they're going to ask you to do different things you're not used to. Um, so as long as you can do that, as long as you can operate in a growth mindset, it could be a very good experience for you. I went to spring training. I came back and I signed with the Cubs again. And then that situation didn't look good for me at the AAA level. I don't know what was going to happen. I just said, look, I went into Oneri Fleeta was still the farm director at the time. I said, Oneri, like this is our fourth year together now. Like this doesn't look good. Can I get my release? And so Theo had taken over at that point. And he called Theo, and Theo was fine. Like I got a release, and then I think the next day, a friend of mine, Corey Wimberly, actually broke his hand in spring training with the Mets, and he was slated to play to go to AAA, to go to Buffalo with that club. And they needed a guy, and my agent reached out, and it worked out, and ended up signing over there with them for Wally Backman and his club in Buffalo. That was great playing with Wally. You talk about a character, man, and a guy who loved the game. A little rough around the edges, but I loved him, and he was fantastic, and the guys who played for him did too. Um, Another good team though. Matt Harvey was on that team. Juris Familia was on that team. Kirk Neuenweiss was on that team. So a bunch of future big leaguers were on that club.
But Wally Backman, I'd love to have him on the show. You're the second guy I've talked to that played for Wally Backman. They said he's the perfect AAA manager.
He's going to treat you like a grown man. It's no nonsense baseball, no BS. He doesn't want to hear any excuses. If you do something well, he's going to pat you on the rear end, love you up. If you don't, and you walk in and you own it, he'll leave you alone. If you don't do something well and you walk in and you make excuses, he's going to eat you alive. So it was pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward. I loved it. I loved him. I know, listen, perfect man he is not, but none of us are. But for me, he was great. I learned he's savant level intelligent in terms of baseball. He knew the game and he could run a game from a manager's seat too, man. It's just look, there's some things that I know he got the big league job at one point, and
Awesome.
unfortunately, some things came out that weren't as they weren't as favorable and for him, but it wasn't because he didn't know what he was doing. So, but he was a good baseball man, and I appreciated my 6 7 weeks with him.
All right, so that's part one. Sit back, take a deep breath, let the dust settle. Then I head on over to part two, where Bobby talks at length about his incredible post playing career, the things that this guy has been a part of in the professional baseball world is incredible. Head on over for part two.